All right. So we'll start the ball rolling. Welcome to New Zealand Web Fest. It's the second day of the panels, and we have an opportunity to talk to the finalists of our best podcast fiction series. And these are an incredible bunch of people. They are just amazing creatives whose passion to tell stories is only outstripped by the exemplary audio that they match with their stories. I'm hoping we'll get an insight to how they got started and why this story. But to start the ball rolling, let's get them to introduce themselves and tell a little bit about the project that they're up as a finalist for. And Jonathan, we're going to pick on you first.
All right. Well, thank you for that. My show is called The Invicta Collective, and it's a adventure show in the vein of like Indiana Jones and the Mummy, Tomb Raider, that sort of thing. But it deals with the legends of Gilgamesh, as in, what if the legends of Gilgamesh were not just a simple ancient fantasy, but what if they were a lie that was carefully constructed to throw humanity off the scent of a secret that we were never supposed to unearth? And so the story is set in the 1930s, and it deals with a wide range of colorful characters who go in search of this secret. But there appears to be some people out there that do not want them to find out what this secret is. And so that is the premise of our show.
Thank you. Rara, what about yours?
Yeah, I'm running a Place as Beautiful as This, which is a bunch of small little scenes of people talking about love and heartbreak in kind of a magic surrealistic scene. Very short episodes, all under like 15 minutes or so, but using some of my favorite writing over the last decade to get it all in one spot a little bit.
Fantastic. Amber.
Hi. The show that I'm representing is a show called Camlin. It was a show that was released this year. Excuse me. It's a sort of epic post-apocalyptic fantasy series about four people on the run from a magical apocalypse where kind of all the apocalypses all happened at the same time, and like Arthurian legends in particular have all come to life. There's also a dog which presented some interesting sound design challenges. But basically, it's kind of talking about recontextualizing Arthurian folklore in a sort of post-apocalyptic setting, which has been a lot of fun.
And Jack?
Well, our show Table Read takes award-winning scripts and brings them to life in a live table read that we share as a podcast. We're fortunate to have a group of Screen Actors Guild podcasts. We're a signatory, and we do our very best to, do what Hollywood sees, on a daily basis, which is a room full of actors doing a table read that the, audience doesn't get to participate in. So we take award-winning scripts, we bring them to life. We've been so fortunate to have some incredible writing talent, some incredible, voice talent. And I think we're top 100 US today. So that's exciting for us. Yeah.
Wow, incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Pearl,
Yeah.
can you tell us about diversity?
Hi, yeah. Diversity work is half of my PhD in creative practice. So it's a research project. I'm normally a filmmaker and have created a podcast where a network has been accused of racism, and one of the execs is interviewed, and he accidentally blunders that we've got a show in development that ticks all the diversity boxes at once, and he's lying. And so what we get to listen into is a 1 week of a writer's room, which are a very diverse intersectional writers' room who've been tasked with coming up with a pitch that ticks all the diversity boxes at once. And there's a whole social media storm and a lot of things go down. So it very much sounds like a documentary, and I have to put a little disclaimer at the beginning. This is fiction. So normally I start by going, it's a fictional podcast, but we all know that in this chat.
No, I had to admit that when I was listening to it, I was just like, is this for real? This sounds like it's for real. And only because, it's Australian and it's based in the media in Australia, which is something I'm familiar with. And I've just got, hang a tig, this sounds a bit too familiar. But it's wonderful. Ella, Candy Claus.
Yes, I'm Ella. My show is Candy Claus Private Eye. It's a half-hour comedy about Santa's bastard daughter solving hard-boiled Christmas crimes on the North Pole. It's a red and green noir. And It's been very fun to make. Yeah, I've worked with a lot of really great people.
And Alex, can you tell us a bit about hovering?
Hi, I'm Alex. I wrote and directed Hovering. So Hovering's a 7-part. Yeah, you're right. It's a fiction. It is fiction. Yeah. It's about a small town in Tassie where people see a UFO and then the cop who investigates. But the cop's also decided to live his whole life in the closet, and he realizes that when he's interviewing these people who may or may not have seen a UFO, it's the same as keeping the secret of if you're gay. Where if you tell people that you've seen a UFO, then everybody changes how they see you in this small town. So he realizes he's kind of got something the same as these people.
Fantastic. Now, amazing stories, amazing audio, incredible sound. Where does the story start? Like, what was it about this story that you felt you had to put up and out? So, Alex, we'll just go straight back to you. Aren't you lucky?
Look, I thought of this idea when I was at screenwriting school, and I wanted to tell lots of different points of view of a UFO.
Yeah.
But yeah, then when I was developing it, I realized it would be a great audio drama because there's this found footage element to it, and I also realized there was a parallel. But I mean, I keep on having to answer the question if I believe in UFOs. I started off saying no, I don't, but I probably don't. But I am gay, and I came out when I was 14 in a tiny town in Tasmania. So that is the experience that I understand, and that I went, oh, I think that people could understand that experience if I told it through UFOs.
Right. That's fantastic. It's like, Amber, I'm going to presume that you haven't lived through 4 times of apocalyptic type of things, or a talking dog. But what was the thing about your story that you just went, yes, this is what we've got to get out?
Sorry, was that for me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Well, so I didn't write Camlin. So and also the dog doesn't talk. Sorry, I realized.
Oh, sorry.
No. So it was written by a writer and director called Ella Watts, and it was something that she'd kind of written and developed and pitched in a couple of different places, and we'd kind of been working together on a few things, but on like other people's projects.
Yeah.
And I think we think very much the same way when it comes to audio storytelling in particular. Like I have very sort of strange ideas as to what sound design can do as a storytelling medium on its own. And when it came to Ella being like, I just want to make this thing, she kind of came to me and a couple of people that I know who could kind of make it, and was just like, can we make this but make it our way?
Yeah.
And having that kind of freedom was really lovely. Like we did a lot of experimenting with how it was recorded, but then also myself and a couple of other people on the production, our background is kind of in experimental audio storytelling, and we kind of had a lot of freedom to do that in the sound design element of it as well, which was really fun. And then also I scored the series as well, and a lot of the music came from sort of traditional Welsh music and songs, and so kind of using that as a basis for a score was very interesting and really rewarding as well. I think from reading the scripts, it was because it had kind of, I think Ella has a really deep understanding of how audio drama works. So reading the scripts, you know, basically like all the work had kind of already been done. I could already hear it in my head and had a very particular way of how, this is how I think this should sound.
Yeah.
And it's, I think it's very rare to get that kind of feeling when you're first reading a script, having a very strong idea of what it should sound like. And yeah, it turned out to be a really big undertaking, but it's a story that seems to have resonated with a lot of people, and it was very rewarding to make. And yeah, we're currently in the process of trying to make more, but yeah, it was very clear very early on that it's like, no, this is something special, and I want to make it. I want to see what it sounds like. I want to be a part of that. Yeah.
And Rara, yours. What I mean,
Mine's-
you're normally from the actual play sort of world, and you've moved into the fiction.
And that's kind of how this happened. I run a group of like 50 players where we're telling all these TTRPG type games, and all of them are from theater, and I'm more of a poetry blue collar background. So our main stories just took so many hours to edit, about 20 to 30 per episode, that I wanted to start making something a little shorter just so I could get a dopamine kick. And also to include some of these wonderful players that I knew I wouldn't get to for months and months and months.
Yeah.
So I took a bunch of D&D nerds and I was like, hey, you want to do an audio drama? And I messaged my friend Gina, who's in Blackwater. That's another show that we're friends with. And she came and recorded the first episode with me. And what we submitted was the first audio drama episode I've ever made. And I made it the night before we submitted it. So I'm very happy people liked it. But it was definitely a community project because we had a group of people who really loved working together and telling these stories. And my channel is a little more melancholy in their storytelling. So I gathered the most dramatic of the D&D nerds. And now we're kind of starting this little side project. Next year, I'm going to have them all submit stories instead of me writing them. So I can start showing some of them what it's like to have their own words played back to them with a bunch of fun sound design behind. And that's kind of what we're doing.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's
I'm
wonderful.
a big
Now,
fan of Camlin, by the way, while I have the
Oh
mic.
my goodness. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, just saying.
The Arthurian aspect of it sounds really awesome.
I had it recommended to me multiple times from people in the TTRPG world before I actually found it and listened. And when I saw you were on this panel, I fainted and then got up, and now I'm good.
Oh no, 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 no. I'm not worth that. But thank you. That's very
Appreciate
inspiring.
it.
Thank you.
we love a little bit of pod love. That's fantastic. Jonathan, you've got this story, which is so very different from the entry from last year. So what was it about this story that you just went, yeah, this is the one to tell?
Well, I can still remember the first time and that I watched Raiders of the Lost Ark and how I felt while I was watching it, and it was just so fun. And it was just like that escapism, just like a break from the ordinary and just getting lost in the mystery and the story and the action and everything. And so everything, I think that was like a defining moment in my life because anything that I get, I almost like rate it up against like, did listening to this podcast or watching this movie or reading this book, how close does it get me to how I felt when I watched Raiders for the first time? And so I've always thought it would be awesome to do something in that vein since I love it so much. And so I just kind of have been for years thinking about, how could we tell a story that would have the same spirit as that, but yet not be a carbon copy. Let it, be faithful to the genre, but yet again, not just stealing scenes from a bunch of different things and mashing it together, having it be its own story. And so I met Matthew Higgins from the UK, and he just so happened to have an idea that was almost exactly the same as mine for a story. And so I was like, Matthew, we need to get together and come up with this, story. We need to iron it out because I want to do this. And so we brainstormed for a while, and then we got together with Vince DeJani and said, hey, can you help us turn this into a script if we give you like story outlines and things? But then he helped too. So between the three of us collaborating on the story, it became something pretty cool. We have a 5-season plan if we can do the whole thing. So it'll be like one story arc per season, sort of, but it will play into the larger narrative of the whole project. But there's a definite beginning and a definite end because I don't like it when things just kind of float away at the end. I like very clear endings and good endings in stories. Now, my definition of a good ending might be different than yours, so just I don't know, but I think everybody will appreciate it. But it's very different from the zombie one that we did. That one was just like you said about from last year. That was just kind of fun because I always thought it would be fun to do a zombie comedy, and so that's how that one came about. But this one definitely has a lot more planning. That was just a standalone. So this being a series, a lot more planning. So it took a while to get this one out. But we're crowdfunding right now for the rest of our first season, and we'll see how that goes. So yeah, if you anybody wants to crowdfund, you can go to Kickstarter and type in the Invicta Collective and see what we have.
It's like a little bit of shameless promotion is perfectly acceptable.
A little bit.
But
Just
if
a little bit.
we were talking comedy, Ella, Candy Claus. How did you come to Candy Claus because that's one hell of a private eye. And the premise behind the story is hilarious. And even the murder is it's terrible to say, but the murder is quite funny too.
Yeah, I try to stay equal parts funny and deeply horrifying. You know, that's just the goal.
Good life
Yeah,
advice.
so during the pandemic, my mom dug up a gift certificate I had given her for Christmas when I was 12 for a short story. And she was like, "You're not doing anything." It was 2020, she was right. And she was like, "I'm cashing this in. I want my short story." And so my mom only reads mystery novels, just like so I knew I had to write a mystery and I wanted to make it a Christmas mystery. And I was like, okay, great, we've got the parameters. Who's my Christmas detective? And I was like, well, it's obviously Santa's bastard daughter, born on September 25th. And so I wrote her the story, and then I just like couldn't stop thinking about candy. And she stayed in my mind until I wrote it and finally made it a few years later. And yeah, I think also like I like audio fiction, and in screenwriting, I just got tired of finishing scripts and putting them in a box, and wanted to focus more on making stuff and less on just writing stuff.
That's fantastic. Now, Jack, how did you get started? Because table read, that's a massive cast.
Well, listen,
And
it handshakes with exactly what Ella just said. You
yeah,
know, I traditionally came from film sound, and so I would get a script from the studio that had already been greenlit for production, and then how's the sound design going to work, and how are we going to integrate the soundtrack, and how's the surround sound mix? So that's how I came to, to this forum. So we start with scripts that stay in the box or that have circulated Hollywood or that have won 15 awards and that still hasn't been, picked up or made or optioned. And we bring it to life in a live table read, which is oftentimes what happens in Hollywood when people want to flesh out their scripts or studios want to hear how they sound if they're interested. And it was very organic. A friend of mine who's with the Screen Actors Guild Board does table reads for AFI and SAG and for private clients. And he invited me to some, and I said, well, we should be recording these, and we can augment it with a soundtrack with sound effects and music because it's written as a visual script. It's not written for audio. So we have the exposition by the best narrators we can get, and we employ as much of Hollywood as we can to kind of cue the audience how to feel when. And sometimes we get it right, I guess. But we always start with fantastic writing. I mean, it's really, for us, it's an anthology show. So we start with scripts or notable scripts or for some reason. And so we're very lucky in that aspect.
and Pearl, I can see that you've been nodding your head as well. So how did the diversity work come about? Why was it this story that you wanted to tell?
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you all, that many of you come from film. So I basically had a problem where I needed to explore in a long form format, because it needed to be long form for the amount of nuance and the robust conversation that I wanted to get from it. And film is expensive, and you need so many people involved. So it was really kind of very practical to go, podcasting is a really good way to tell this story. It's contained. It's able to be done with a lower budget. There's a freedom to audio that you don't necessarily get on screen, and particularly when you're dealing with diversity, sometimes when you're wanting to comment on something, you then have to put it on screen, and it's so complex. If you don't speak to it, you're kind of perpetrating the thing you're trying to criticize, whereas in audio, it's so much easier. You don't see it, and it's up to the audience, and then you can criticize it all you want because the audience has created that in their head. So it was a really freeing medium. And the other reason was, it sounds so much like nonfiction because I used long form improvisation. So I had story beats and the story that I wanted to tell and the kind of elements of theme that I wanted to express. And then through a workshop I have 9 co-creators, and they are the co-creators and the performers. They created their own characters. We then designed what it was and sat in a room, all individually mic'd, and did long form improvisation. So the longest takes were about an hour and 15 minutes that were then cut down. And that the freedom to be able to cut that so much in audio as opposed to what I'd be able to do even with a multi-cam shoot was amazing. So that's why the medium of podcast was so useful.
Well, I'm gonna throw it open now, because I would like you guys to tell me one of the best moments that has come from doing fiction podcasts. It could be this episode, this series, it could be something else, but what was the one moment that's just gone, yes, this is it. This is why I'm doing it. This is, this has made a difference. Does anybody want to go first?
I do remember recording the scene that we've got in the end of season 1 of Hovering.
Yeah.
And I went to acting school, so I've got lots of actor friends that I knew I could draw on, and so I knew that we had great actors, but recording that particular scene, and I kind of don't want to give any spoilers, but it's like a little conversation that this kid is having inside a cubby, and we recorded it literally in a cardboard box in the producer's garage.
Yeah.
But I just knew when these, like 32, 33-year-old women were pretending to be little kids talking about this UFO. It was so beautiful the way that they were connecting with each other. And I thought, that's exactly, these people have someone to listen to them and to believe them about this UFO. And that's the point of the story. It was really nice to be there when they were recording that.
It was just that moment that just went, yes, this is what it's about.
Yeah. And there's something about the medium of audio which feels like you're listening in on some like private conversation. And I really like that.
Has anybody else got a glimmer, a golden moment?
A similar thing to that, actually. So there's again, towards the end of Camlin, there's a scene where all the characters are sitting around a bonfire and they're drinking and they're having a party, and they're like just kind of it's this moment of safety before the kind of finale happens. And we recorded it, I think it was the second last day, and we recorded the whole thing in a week. We somehow managed to squeeze like 6 or 7 people into this tiny room to record, and we mostly recorded on we managed to find this amazing microphone it was a stereo microphone, but you could change the polar pattern of the microphone after recording. So it kind of did this wonderful, the best way I've been able to sort of describe it to people is like, imagine shooting in wide and then being able to like zoom in on individual actors and kind of turning the wide into a 2-shot. This thing changed my life. I know this isn't the tech conversation. I'm not going to get into it, but basically,
but I think we can all appreciate it.
Yeah. Like
that's what an ambisonic microphone will do. An ambisonic microphone will do that.
Yeah. So it's not ambisonic in that it's not 3, doesn't give you that 3D effect, but it's more that like it allows you to turn an omnidirectional mic into like a figure of 8, but after you've recorded the thing, which is really cool. I mean, anyway, so for this scene, the idea was that like there were all the characters around a campfire, and then one of them stood up and did a speech. And it was just this delightful moment where, so we kind of got all the actors sitting on the sofa behind me. We gave them all cans of Iron Brew, and we said, don't open them until we've started recording. So it meant that like while we were recording, you got all the sounds of like the cans opening and stuff. And then while this character had stood up and was doing a speech and was walking back and forth from one side of the microphone, we had all the rest of the cast who'd kind of all been in this really small space for about a week, like heckling and responding to things that are being said and like making jokes and adding extra stuff in, which was really delightful. And it was just this wonderful thing just to listen to. And it was that rare thing of because I was just listening because I was having to look at the computer and just hearing it and kind of going like I don't need to add anything to this. This is wonderful on its own. And it was this wonderful kind of highlight from what was a very busy, very stressful week of recording. It was just this delightful moment of connection.
Just a moment. Well, I mean, I have to say that I write very short fiction myself, and the first time I'd given the script to the producer, and I hadn't given him any direction whatsoever. I just said, here's a bit of a story. What do you think we could do with it? And what he sent back were these incredible layers of audio that he'd mixed in, and he'd taken a story and it he had made it a tale for everyone to listen to because it was just, and it was just magic the way that how I heard it in my head when I was writing it was exactly how he produced it. And that sort of, incredible gift of audio is something that I know as writers or producers, you'll come across people sort of, maybe once or twice in your career where you just go, that's it. That's magic. That's what it's all about. And that's mine. And so does anybody else have one? Just that moment that you
I
just
don't
go,
know if
yes.
there's like a specific moment that I can point to in any of
Yep.
my productions that was like the greatest thing. I have a unique one where for the Invicta Collective, David Ogrodowski, who plays one of our main characters in the first episode, he sent me his lines, and somehow in the translation, I don't know if it was from the studio he recorded at or wherever, but they got corrupted. Some words were garbled and different things happened to where it really became something I couldn't use. And it
Yeah.
was, I felt terrible because he spent a lot of time, he was traveling, he did it just for me and all this. And so I'm like, David, I'm up in Buffalo and he's down in Pittsburgh. And I'm like, is there any way that you could meet me like halfway or something, or I can come to you? I think I offered to come to him to re-record, and he was like, I'll meet you halfway. So we ended up recording his entire part in my van behind an outlet mall. So he was a trooper. So I always say we had to kidnap him to get the part, but that was an interesting thing. But my favorite part of any production is because I do the mixing and the sound design and stuff for it as well. But when I've been doing the dialogue cut and then doing the sound design, and then when I finally get the music to put in there with that, so it's basically now I have all the puzzle pieces. And
Yeah.
that first time, and I still have to go and like do all the tweaks and the mix and everything, but that first time to hear that whole puzzle assembled, it just gives me chills like every time. So that's something that it's almost like the gift that keeps on giving in that respect, because
Yeah.
every single time, every single scene, when it's all together for the first time, that's my favorite part of the process, I'll say.
Ella, do you have anything? How did your mum like the mystery?
Oh, she's a huge fan. Yeah, I can't keep her away. In general, moms seem to really like Candy Claus. We've just heard from a lot of moms, our own, others, and
Yeah.
super proud of that. Love getting the mom demo, really important. Yeah, mine is we were recording remotely with Mujan Zulfagari, who plays Minty, our irrepressibly cheerful elf sidekick.
Mm-hmm.
And I was directing over Zoom. She's incredibly talented. Every take was gold, so funny. But at some point during the recording, her voice went into such a high register that Zoom cut it out, and I stopped being able to hear her while I was directing. And I just had faith. Yeah, and it was fine because she's great. And she was really recording from her end and turned out fine.
Yeah.
And I will say I'm proud that we seem to have been able to get an audience of both Christmas lovers and Christmas haters. I'm a Christmas lover, but the show is for Christmas haters too.
Well, I have to say I'm not a real big fan of Christmas, and yeah, it just ticked the boxes. It was great.
Thank you.
It just made me laugh, and the sound mixes and the terrible sweaters and the singing. Jack, have you got one?
Listen, the most impressive thing to me has been I guess our show got to a place where Sean was approached to do an after-school program for the public school district here in Los Angeles. And he's busy on a show. So Mark and I have put together this program for the Unified School District here. And we leveraged our show and we reached out to a few sponsors because it's a public school, and a few companies gave 6 figures of equipment to the local school district so we could do an after-school program for middle school kids and podcast. And I think that our show hit that level where we could have that level of influence and still do something for the community and give kids a voice in podcast, because they're always told to sit down and shut up. I think that was a good way to leverage what we've done beyond our own footprint or our own self-promotion. And I think it's
Yeah.
interesting because I think if we've gotten nowhere. And if I were larger, could I get every school in Southern California their own studios? Because we're just a little show and we've gotten all these kids, and Mark and I have been running the after school. There's another semester going and several other districts have reached out. But so I think it's that you can have a positive community effect beyond your show. So that's been the most impressive thing to me.
That's incredible. Now,
Yeah.
Rara, I know there's something along those lines that you do as well.
We do a little bit of like crowdfunding granting to people within our own little community.
Mhm.
I've only been a part of it 11 months in the whole space entirely. Audio drama, maybe 5. So we have our group, and we've already given out 2 grants where we'll buy some show new mics just based on their story concept alone. And we were able to give that to an all Filipino cast doing Filipino mythology in Canada. And we just were able to give another channel like a grant, like, hey, we'll pay for 3 of your web submission entries. Because we kind of come in from a punk rock mutual aid mindset a little bit. So
Yeah.
we're trying to maintain that with any sort of fame or leverage we seem to get. My favorite part about the show, I think, is kind of what Ella had seen at the beginning, where the stories kind of have a place to be. I was that strange kid in 3rd grade with the yellow briefcase that said poems really big on it, and I wouldn't let anyone see. And then I'd make photocopies and just hand out zines. And then later, my spouse creature and I ran a poetry publishing company, and I had a few books out, and we were just publishing our friends. And my dad and brother both passed within like 2 years, and all the creative energy was kind of wiped out for a little
Yeah.
bit. Fast forward a few years later, and our audio drama series is some of my favorite writing from that time. And I had just been holding on to it for this grip of years and just hoping someday to find that energy again. So
Yeah.
to hear some of my favorite friends reading these stories, that's what did it for me, is just the full circle of the creative process. And there was some quote like, if I'm not using the right words, then teach me new ones. And I'm so happy that these words are still being used in the way that I meant them to at the time. So we haven't really grown out beyond our hopes and dreams. It's more
Yeah.
just shock to be invited onto panels like this at this point, but having a wonderful time in community telling these stories.
Well, the stories are beautiful, and for each and every one of you on the panel, I mean, I've listened to them, and I'm just so excited that there is such an incredible range of stories that are out, that are available, that are ticking boxes to listeners. That it's not. I mean, I suppose in Australia we've got the mainstream radio, which is no longer something that a lot of people want to listen to anymore because it's pretty much homogenous. And when you've got the fiction podcast, you've got your stories, you've got the stories of people who want to listen and hear themselves in those stories. And whether it's for entertainment value or whether it's just for pure escapism, it's just gorgeous. And we're getting close to time, and I've got so many questions that I haven't asked yet. But really quickly, what's been the biggest hurdle to get the stories up and going?
Funding.
Funding?
Funding.
Yeah, funding.
Funding is the biggest
It's always
hurdle.
going to be funding. That's the answer to
Funding is
everything.
going to be the biggest hurdle.
Less
For
than
some
a year
people,
of
it's
audio
IP.
design.
Some people have funding and can't tell a good story. There's plenty of those out there too.
Yeah.
So, I can't, it's hard to compete with McDonald's, and the food's not good.
For
Yeah.
me, it's like abandoning the idea of something perfect in your mind and making something real in the world. I think
Yeah.
like you've got that like constant fear, and it's like, oh, and then you just like push through it, and you get waveforms out, and then you get sound design, and you cast people, and you send 1,000 emails, and it's like that crossing that gap, I think, is
Yeah.
a big hurdle.
So from sort of like concept to audio.
Yeah, just like making that push where you keep going.
Yeah.
That was huge for us as well because this story has taken years and years to make, but mostly because we started recording in COVID in lockdown in Melbourne, and so we kept
Mhm.
on like you'd come out of COVID for like 3 days, and then we'd be like, okay, we've got these actors, and then you'd go back into lockdown, and we'd have to recast everybody, and yeah. So one thing that I'm really proud that we were able to do is me and the producer Clea, we just kept going. We were just like, all right, we don't have funding from anyone. We know that we've got good actors. We've had to cancel this recording session again, and we're just going to keep on going. And it took us like 3 years, but that was the biggest hurdle. But it was
Yeah.
also because we didn't have any funding and we didn't have anyone kind of breathing down our backs. We knew that we're just doing this because we love this story, and
Yeah.
it'll just take as long as it takes. Yeah.
It does. Pearl, what about you? Best, worst?
I think it's related. It's about audience and,
Yeah.
wanting to make something that has an impact. So my favorite things have been having conversations with people and pulling it apart and then just grilling you. And that when they grill you, yes, this person had a listening experience where they're hooked and they want to know more. And the hardest part is going, for me as an independent, self-funded, it's like,
Yeah.
there, and I've always thought with this project it will have a long tail. It's not it's never something that's going to go viral. It's going to find people at the right time, and so it's really kind of staying the course. It's just 1 year since we released, and keeping going and going, elbowing into new zones to find new listeners is kind of relentless and ongoing. So I really appreciate things like this where we get to connect with others going through the same thing.
I know, isn't it wonderful? I think that also one of my glimmers is hopping on a panel, realizing that there were other people that did what I did and were having the same, reactions to listening to other podcasts. I mean, I'm an audio nerd from way back. I grew up with radio. We didn't have TV. So for me, it's a really natural progression just to move into that audio world. But I do remember one of my general managers telling me when I said, oh, we should do an audio drama. And he just went, oh, no, that's all dead. It's like nobody does that anymore. Nobody's interested in that anymore. And I know, right?
I was once in a strange folk band that I tried to convince to do kind of an audio drama behind a curtain situation, and
Yeah.
nobody was interested.
It's just I honestly think the BBC has done so much damage by making so many lackluster afternoon dramas.
Sure.
That it's just ruined it for everyone. All that money, all that time, just gone. All right, it's like 11 o'clock. Like, I'm sorry, like my brain's off the hook.
It is perfectly acceptable. But if you are all listening to podcasts, does anybody have a podcast that they would recommend? A little bit of podcast love. Rara?
A bunch. Yeah. Do you want audio drama or AP?
Oh, look, it can be
TTRPG?
anything at
Okay.
all. Anything that you admire.
My dear friend Tot runs Soul Operator, which is an audio drama that just got onto Rusty Quill fairly recently. And being friends with them kind of gave me the idea, like, I might want to try this also.
Yeah.
Besides that, I just got done listening to The Ties That Bind, which is a beautiful, like, two-person end of the world TTRPG. I have so many shows I could shout out right now, but I'll start with those two. And if we have time at the end, I've got like 8 more.
Okay. Jonathan, did you have someone?
I do. I had just been listening to Oakbridge, which is like a brand new show. They have their first season out. Been really enjoying that one. What was it? The Dial-Up as well. They've won some awards here recently. But it's just such a charming and delightful show. Like, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. The spirit of that show is just refreshing to me. So I really enjoyed that one. And then I just got to shout out my favorite one, probably of all time, and that's Magus Elgar. Just one season done by Kennedy Phillips, but it's a high fantasy adventure comedy, and it is just delightful. Again, just like the humor, awesome. So it's one of my favorites of all time.
Anybody else?
Yeah, yes.
I'm gonna sort of. Sorry, no, you go.
I was listening to Shocking, Heartbreaking, Transformative. It was another nominee in the most innovative listening experience of the Signal Awards. And so we've connected with Jess Shane, the maker of that. And it goes into the ethics of documentary podcasting. And it's so interesting. It just peels back the curtains. And it kind of is this layered experience of thinking through what shouldn't we be doing as we make podcasts. Really interesting.
I'm going to recommend Dr. Good Vibes. It's a really great thriller about a savage love style sex advice podcast that starts getting creepy calls. It's a very entertaining thriller.
And Australian.
Yes. Yeah.
Amber, do you have one?
Yeah, so I'm gonna add a +1 to Soul Operator, because Soul Operator is fantastic. I really love it. Like I think I know a lot of people who are also in the actual play space, and it's always really interesting to me when people try and blend the two things together in really interesting ways. And I think Soul Operator does it in a very unique way, which I really appreciate. I'm gonna I've got two sort of slightly weirder ones. So there's one that came out, I think this year. It's called Paddle Boat. So it's made by two people it's made by a voice actor and somebody who I've known for a while, who's just been around the audio drama space but has never made anything. And it's the most like DIY you can get. For the theme tune, this guy picked up a guitar and played it for a minute and was like, "That's the theme tune." And the episodes are maybe 2-3 minutes long. It's very much this like put together in a shed, tiny audio drama. But what it does with that time is really interesting and kind of amazing. And it's very rare to see something so small and it's been made with, on absolutely nothing, kind of be really resonant and kind of hit really hard. The other one is Chain of Being, which is the opposite end of the spectrum, which is made by a noise artist. It's like, it's this sort of sci-fi opera thing. And it's kind of like, well, what would happen if you spoke to a alien plant that was the size of a planet, like that level of weird sound design. And also because it's like, because the guy's a noise artist, because the person's a noise artist, what you get is just the weirdest, slightly hostile to the listener soundscapes, and it's unlike anything else out there right now, I think.
Wow, this is like my list is now growing.
Oh yeah, I've been subscribing to everyone's podcast while they've been talking, by the way. I just want to quietly clicking away on them.
Well, it's always time to go, but thank you so much for joining us, for being part of this panel, for bringing your stories to the audio atmosphere. I think now more than ever, we need those stories being told. It's just a gorgeous thing. I mean, I'm going to be advocating for audio my entire life. That's just how I roll. But thank you so much for joining us, and wishing you all the best. This is the New Zealand Web Fest for 2024.